Hello and welcome to the NCC More Podcast. Here in our time together today, we want to continue our conversation that we started on Sunday and really just add a little bit more value to your life and into your marriages, because right now we're in a series entitled A Different Kind of Marriage. And the big idea of the series is that as Christians, as Christ followers, we should have a different kind of marriage. And so we said, if that's going to be the case, what does that really look like?
Absolutely. And so we started talking about the purpose of marriage. And the purpose of marriage for a Christ follower is different than just the general purpose of marriage. It is to build God's kingdom and to give God glory. To give God glory and to build God's kingdom. And what we have to understand is that, yes, that is our job as individuals who are following Christ. But as married people, as a couple, we have a chance to do something a little bit unique. We can show an image of God to the world through having uncommon unity and unconditional love. Uncommon unity and unconditional love. So that's really our goal. And so when we say that that's the purpose behind marriage, then my purpose also is to love my spouse as Christ has loved me, so that people can see that picture of God in the world. And really what it comes down to is that the mission is more important.
Yeah, and that's what we want to do. We want to live a marriage on mission. And if we're going to do that, then this last week what we talked about the perspective of marriage. And so many times I think this can be the missing link.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have the mindset, we don't have the philosophy, we don't have the mental view of what it needs to be in order to live out this purpose, this mission. And so this last week, in talking about that perspective, we said that the perspective of marriage is future focused.
Yes.
That it's always looking into the future. And we went to the scriptures and we said where Paul says, forgetting those things that are behind, right? And stretching forward to what is ahead. And that is the perspective that we have to carry. We've got to carry that mental view that is always looking forward into everything that God wants us to be. Because even today, we're not satisfied with what we have.
Not at all.
Because we're looking forward into the future,
Absolutely.
right? I'm not just totally content with where I am, and you're not content with where you are, and not just content with our marriage, right? No. We're looking into the future because I'm going to grow, you're going to grow, together we're going to grow together. And so, I think we have to have that perspective. So whenever you put the purpose and then you begin to put that perspective together, it begins to build out what we say, then you got to have your plan, what we're going to talk about this Sunday, and then obviously it takes practice.
Absolutely.
But in this...
And, as you're talking about being future focused, I think that's so important because our purpose is really large. It's really big. It's very aspirational. Just like our purpose when we come to Jesus is very aspirational. To say, I want to be like Christ. I want to love the world the way that Jesus loved the world. I want to follow him and shape my life based on him. Every day I want to get up and deny myself and take up my cross and follow him. That can feel very, very heavy. And when we look at where we are today versus where we want to go, there's a huge gap. There's a huge distance. And I think that's the same even in our marriages. When we have a goal to show the world a picture of God through uncommon unity and unconditional love, we can look at our marriages and go, man, we have a ways to go. Yeah. But it's our perspective, our forward-looking perspective that gives us the strength for the journey. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to start that forward-looking perspective with heaven. One day I'm going to stand before God and I'm going to give an account for my life, and that's going to include the way that I treat my husband. Yeah. One day I'm going to spend eternity with Jesus, and what I did for him is going to matter. And then my lifetime, that it's not just an eternal future focus, but it also is a lifetime future focus. Right. We don't know how short or how long our lifetime will be. But for my lifetime, I have an opportunity to grow and become and to serve my spouse. But there also is the short-term future focus of what is next. What is next? And that's the way that we have to go. And that's not something that we just made up. That's something that the Apostle Paul talks about he gave so many different instructions and aspirations to the church at Ephesus. And then he said, is that the verse I'm thinking about?
I don't know what verse you're thinking about right now, but why don't you keep going and I'll tell you where it is.
Okay, good. I'm glad one of us knows. Anyway, but he said all these different things that they were supposed to do. And then he said, but I do one thing. I haven't attained all this. So don't get nervous.
That's in Philippians.
It's Philippians.
Yeah, Philippians.
Well,
okay.
I mean,
you're good.
It's one of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ephesians, Philippians. Oh, they're next door neighbors.
Yes, they're neighbors. They're neighbors,
anyway,
yes.
In Philippians, he says, the one thing I do is I look forward, right? And I move forward. And that's what I'm trying to do, that I'm moving forward. I forget what's behind me and I move forward. And I think that's how we have to live our lives if we're going to change our lives. But it definitely is the way you have to live your marriage.
Absolutely, and when you look at the word perspective, right, it comes from the same word that you get like spectacle, right, because it talks about the lens that you see through, and you shared the story this last weekend about Julietta, one of our daughters who got glasses, and obviously everything completely changed, and it's all about the lens that you see through, and so that's why I think that this is such a missing link in so many marriages, is because if you don't have that lens that looks to eternity.
Right.
If you don't have that lens that looks beyond our current situation and into the rest of our lifetime.
Right.
And if you don't have that lens to just say, okay, what is next? What do I need to do next? What is my next step? If you don't have that perspective and that lens and you just sit in the disappointment, the discouragement, the frustration of right now, and you can't see beyond that, it's really hard to live the kind of life and have the kind of marriage that God wants us to have.
Absolutely.
And it really comes to that perspective.
Well, and it changes things because, in game theory, there's the idea of two actors, and you're doing your different actions based on the actions of the other actor, but also on your goals. And there's this thing called like a zero-sum game. So like either you win or I win. But then there is the game that is just the eternal game. And you realize that you're going to have to figure out how to keep playing. And marriage is a lot like that. It's a long-term game. And so sometimes we can be in moments where we want to say very hurtful things to each other.
Yeah.
Well, at least I want to say very hurtful things to you. I don't know if you want to say.
I'm too much like Jesus to do that, but yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But anyway, I want to say hurtful things.
Yes, me too.
But I don't.
Yes.
And the reason I don't, it isn't because, honestly, I'm that super spiritual. It's because I know that night we're going to get in bed together.
That's so
we're
good.
going to go to sleep. The next day, I'm going to have to figure out the school run with you.
Yeah.
And it just makes life more difficult.
Yeah.
And so you learn how to let that future focus influence your present action. You allow that future focus to influence your present decision. And it begins to inform everything that you're doing. And so you have a long-term view instead of going, man, I'm really mad right now. And there's some things, though, that we've discovered that can really kill your perspective. Oh, there's no doubt.
That can really cloud that lens, if you would, where you cannot see clearly and it just gets so blurry. And one of those things is comparison. And we gave 5 on Sunday. We talked about 5 perspective killers and 5 perspective keys. And one of that is comparison. And I think today, maybe more than ever before, because there's so many more people that you can compare yourself to. Absolutely. They used to say, Jay, keeping up with the Joneses, right? Well, the Joneses lived in your city, on your block. Like, you could see their house, you could see their car. But now the Joneses could live in Northern California. They could live in Virginia. Like, you do social media, there's so much to compare ourselves to.
Did you know the Joneses were an actual couple?
No.
They were an actual...
Did you learn this in game theory?
You just made fun of my nerdiness.
What? No, not at all. I would never do such things.
The Joneses were an actual couple.
Okay,
they were a socialite actual couple. And so people talked about keeping up with the Joneses. It would be like keeping up with the Kardashians. In fact, that is literally the play on words.
Yeah, very good.
So that's where that saying came from.
Yes, very good.
It was an actual specific couple.
Right. And so comparing yourself with the Joneses or the Kardashians, it's a perspective killer. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I can remember one time. Oh, I love you. Anyway, comparison. Okay.
Yes.
So one of my favorite comparison stories really illustrates this point. You don't know what's going on in other people's lives. You know way too much of what's going on in your own life. And that's the problem with comparison, is that you're comparing what you know, right, and what you're focusing on with other people's highlight reels. Because you don't know what's really going on in their life. I remember when we were teaching a couples class. It was a couples Sunday school class, and the night before, it was a Saturday night, and we were supposed to go out on a date, and I don't remember what happened, but no date occurred. We were not able to do what I wanted to do, and you were busy with work or something, and I was very, very irritable. And I got on Facebook, which is the worst thing to do when you're irritable, and I got on Facebook, and I saw a couple in our class. And they had posted, and she had posted, having a wonderful sushi date with my husband, and oh, this is so wonderful. And I can remember thinking, and I don't do this very often, but I thought, man, they're having a sushi date, and here we are, we didn't even get to have our date. I was really, really irritated. And I think I even brought it up to you and said, look, her husband took her out on a sushi date. Well, the next day we're in class, and after class was finished, this couple was there, and I said, oh, I saw that, I said to the husband of the couple, I said, oh, I saw that you took your wife on a date last night. That's just so lovely. He looked at me. He said, what are you talking about? And then he smiled, and he goes, oh, my wife is so sweet. And I thought, oh, no, I'm in trouble. He said, we were supposed to have a sushi date, but it actually got interrupted. And I had to go into work. And so for 3 hours, I was on a work phone call while she ate all her sushi by herself. And she went to bed by herself. And she was still so sweet to talk about that. Oh, that's so precious. And he left into the hallway to go and hug his spouse and left me standing there with Philip grinning that grin right there. Comparison is a perspective killer.
Yeah, that's right.
Comparison is a perspective killer. It keeps you from seeing what you do have. And, you know, if you're going to have a perspective killer, you've got to have a perspective key.
That's right.
And so gratitude is the answer to comparison.
Yeah, you know, whenever you live with that gratitude, focusing on what you do have, not what you don't have, you know, it's so powerful. You know, whenever we take a moment just to pause during the day. Just to thank God for the relationship we do have, the marriage we do have.
It's true.
Man, it just changes everything. Gratitude is really an atmosphere shifter.
It is.
Whenever you begin to get thankful for the life that you have, all of a sudden the attitude just shifts. You know, the other day, somebody on our staff was saying, you know, they were quoting something that we say a lot of, like, I don't have to, I get to. And so they asked, and they said, do I have to lock up after the event? And they caught themselves and they changed, and they said, do I get to lock up after the event? Because it that totally shifts. It sounds like so funny, and it's like, oh, but that's just a play on words. No, because one is like, oh, I have to, but whenever I get to, what I'm doing is like, I'm so grateful to have this opportunity. I'm so grateful to have this job, to work in this place. I'm so grateful for all of these people that are coming to church, that are being fed God's word and are growing in their, and it totally changes everything. And gratitude does that in our relationships.
Absolutely.
And so we have to begin to be proactive in that, not just comparing ourselves to what we don't have or what we wish that our spouse was like, but when we're grateful for what we do have. That's one of the keys to comparison. And then whenever you get to another killer and we talk about blame.
Ooh, blame.
Talk about blame. Man, it is so difficult to live in victory, to live in peace, to live in harmony, when all you do is blame your spouse for everything in your life.
Absolutely. And whenever you have a challenge in your marriage, if your first response is, that's not my fault, your perspective is completely off.
Yeah.
Because it's not a competition to see who's at fault. Marriage is a team sport. Marriage is us together with Jesus moving forward. And Christian marriage is in particular a team sport. We're supposed to be doing this together. So no matter whose fault it was, it really doesn't matter. We both share the responsibility of moving forward. We both share the responsibility of changing things as we go forward.
Yeah.
And I can always tell that we're not on good footing if blame language comes to the surface.
Yeah.
If we start pointing out, you never, you always,
that's right.
and all of those different things, that's not good language. But there's a perspective key that can come in and can fix that, is that we choose to live in the perspective of forgiveness.
Yeah, that's right.
That we've already made a pre-decision that when you do screw up, I'm going to forgive you.
Yeah.
When you do forget certain things, I'm going to forgive you. I'm not going to blame you. Instead, I'm going to come alongside you, and I'm going to use forgiveness as my superpower to be able to move forward in our marriage.
Yeah, and it's so true, because sometimes like things that it really is my fault. You know, it is my fault. Like I said I was going to do something and I didn't do it, and now we're in a difficult place, and it is 100% my fault. And yet you still can't blame, because then that puts us at odds against one another. And you choose to forgive me. And whenever you choose to forgive me, it lets us work together to solve the problem, to overcome, to get back where we need to get. And so I think that's just such an important, it's an important perspective to have, is that, sometimes it's not like me saying, oh, this is my fault, when it's really your fault.
No,
right?
That's completely different.
That's not what we're talking about.
It's a time waster.
Exactly.
Blame is a time waster.
Right.
Because blame necessarily means that I really do think it's your fault.
Right.
But I think you could even think of it in terms of sports. If you were out on the field, Philip, and there was a guy who missed his tackle, you're not going to stop before the whistle blows and go, oh, they missed their it's his fault, and then get sacked. No, you're going to do what you have to do to be able to still make the play. And I think that's what's so great about having two. You know, the Bible talks about how two is better than one. One of the reasons that two is better than one is that when one drops a ball, the other one can help them to pick it up and move forward. When one makes a mess, there's two people to clean it up. And I know there's been so many different times in our life where I was so grateful for you not stopping and wasting our time blaming me for something I did, but instead jumping in and helping me to fix and to move forward. But this next killer is regret. And this is kind of the opposite of blame. I feel like blame is really about how I feel about you, but regret is how I feel about me, and regret is how I feel about us. And blame and regret together create incredible toxicity in a relationship.
That's so true.
And they usually do go together, because a lot of times we can't totally hold the regret within ourselves. It spills out onto the other person. But regret is just about focusing on the rearview mirror and saying, I wish we had, I wish we had, I wish we had. And to the detriment of moving forward. And we talk about this a lot. You don't know what that other choice would have yielded. All you know is the result of your current choice. But you don't really know what that other choice would have yielded. Maybe you're guessing correctly that it would have yielded a much better life, but maybe not. Maybe not. And so either way, it's a waste of time. And you've got places to go and things to change. So we can't live our life in regret.
I love what my mom used to say all the time whenever we would start talking about what could have happened. She would always say, woulda, coulda, shoulda. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I remember just from an early age that always with my parents always forcing me to look forward. They're like, what behind you is like, it does woulda, coulda, shoulda. Who cares? Who cares what could have happened or should have happened or would it be different? Like, you have to look forward. So what is that really doing? It pushes us into the key, and the key is responsibility.
That's right.
Because I can't change anything behind me, but I have to take responsibility for everything that's in front of me.
For everything.
So the killer is looking back. The key is looking forward and taking responsibility. However I got here, I'm here.
That's right.
Whatever happened, whatever ball got dropped, whoever disappointed me, all that's in the past. I take responsibility for my life right now and my marriage moving forward. And then the next next killer is fear. And man, fear is so ugly.
Exactly.
Fear comes in, and fear just begins to really rob and bring destruction. And it really kills our perspective because we cannot see into the future because we're so afraid. Right? It's that paralyzing thing,
Yeah.
right? It paralyzes us in the situation. So I can't see forward, and I definitely can't move forward.
Absolutely. And what we have to realize is that fear isn't a situation, it's an emotion. So fear is not a situation, it is an emotion. It's the way that we are receiving the information and what we're doing with it. And the Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I do not have to live in fear. I don't have to. The spirit of my home does not have to be fear. No matter what I am facing, other people have faced it before, and I don't have to face it with fear. I can face it with the power of God on my side, with the love of Christ in my heart towards myself and towards other people, and with a sound mind. In other words, with self-control. I can make good decisions. And this is what's so unfortunate about fear, is that fear will break down literally your ability to make good decisions. It will break down your ability to see things clearly. It'll break down your ability to love those around you. And so you have to change the question. You have to say, what am I really afraid of? And face it. Am I really afraid of death? Okay, then there's some great scriptures about how Jesus has overcome death. Am I afraid of not having enough? There's some great scriptures as a Christ follower of how he is more than enough. There are things that we can do to gain a perspective that will defeat fear. But what it really comes down to is it comes down to having a mindset of generosity.
Yeah, that's right.
Having a mindset of generosity, a mindset of more than enough. So when I begin to be afraid, I start saying, no, I want to live my life in a generous way. So I'm not going to restrict. I'm not going to contract. I'm not going to pull in. Instead, I'm going to live out a little bit more.
Yeah.
One of the best things you can do if you're feeling really, really depressed or if you're feeling anxious is to go and find someone whose life isn't as good as yours and to serve them with all of your heart.
So good.
There is no doubt that changes things for us. Why? Because we begin to live in generosity and it changes our perspective. And I think that's one of the gifts we have in marriage is that when we become afraid, that we have an opportunity to be generous with our spouse. We can be generous with our words and speak life and speak love and speak thankfulness. We can be generous with our time. Maybe we can turn off the television and just have a conversation. We can be generous with our patience, with our forgiveness, with all those other things that we've talked about. We can choose to be generous. And when we choose to be generous, there's not room for fear.
That's right.
There's just not room for fear in our lives.
And then the last killer that we're going to talk about is negativity. And man, negativity, there is nothing more toxic, there's nothing more devastating than getting into an environment of negativity. Beginning to let those negative thoughts build up, let those negative words start coming out of your mouth. Man, that is such a bad place to be in. And it will really kill your perspective because this is what the Bible says, right? I mean, the Bible in Jeremiah 29:11, it says that God created you and he's got a plan for your life. And that plan is to give you a hope and a future. Well, if all I see is negativity, that means I'm not seeing what God said he has for me. Because he said it's good. He says he wants to prosper me. And he wants to prosper everything in my life. So he wants to prosper my marriage. So if all I see is negativity in my marriage, then I can't see beyond my situation into what God can make it. And so the key there to overcome that killer is patience. Because here's what we do. We get impatient.
We do.
We get impatient with each other. We're like, but you're not where you need to be yet. I'm not where I need to be. And we let that negativity build up because we're not where we need to be yet. We're not the people we need to be yet. We're not doing what we say we're going to do yet. And we're just not patient enough, understanding that this is a journey.
It is a journey.
This is a lifetime journey that we're going to walk out together, and we get impatient with one another, and that's when the negativity builds. And so, man, if there is a negative culture in your house right now, a negative culture in your marriage, negativity in your thinking, negativity in your words, negativity in your relationship, in your home, if there's negativity there, here's what I challenge you to do. I challenge you to look, is there patience? Because probably not. is probably very impatient. There's probably not a lot of grace given. And so if there's negativity, my challenge is to be patient. Is to be patient with your spouse, to be patient with the process. We talk about it all the time.
All the time.
It's the process to progress. This is the discipleship. It's a process, and it's not just about the progress is just not the goal.
Right.
It's the process that we learn that takes us to the progress. And so I think for us, if you struggle with negativity, and that's going to kill your perspective, what I would say is I would say just focus on patience.
Yes.
Get patient in your relationship. And I really believe as you are patient, realizing that it's the process, you're going to move forward, that will allow more positivity to begin to build when you have a really long view of marriage.
Absolutely. When you have that future focus, then you can be patient because you understand that you have a ways to go yet. Yeah. You can be patient. But that patience allows you to then feel like you have enough room and you can be more generous. You can be more generous with your grace, be more generous with your time. You could be more generous with all of those things. And when you're more generous, then you're not afraid. So you can take responsibility.
That's right.
Because it's fear that keeps us from taking responsibility. And so we can not be afraid anymore, and we can not look backwards anymore. And instead we can just take responsibility. And when we take responsibility and we realize, man, I have a ways to go.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. A lot of times in marriage, we'll look at the other one and say, you never and you always in a specific area, instead of saying, what could I do to impact the culture of my home? What could I do? I don't take responsibility. But when I take responsibility, man, that gives me a whole lot of room for forgiveness for you. A ton of room, because I want forgiveness for me too. Yeah. And when I live in personal responsibility and forgiveness towards you, then that is going to result in a grateful life. Yeah. Because God has given us incredible gifts. And if we will keep our perspective focused on the future, if we'll reject those things that would kill our perspective, like comparison and blame and regret and all of these other things, and instead we'll focus on truly being grateful, truly being patient, all of these things, then we're going to be able to move forward a lot faster. Yeah. And I believe that our mission demands a future perspective. Yeah. Because the future is what we're going to create it to be. It's not just already there. Yeah. It requires us.
Yeah. And so if we're going to live out this different kind of marriage, we got to live on purpose, right? We've got to have that right perspective. And then this next week, we're going to begin to talk about plan. And it's going to be fun. And we're going to be talking about the plans that you need to have in marriage. And we believe that you got to have a plan because if you're failing to plan, then you're planning to fail. And you've got to be willing to put that plan together if you want to see success in your marriage. And so we're going to be talking about these different areas of marriage that you need to develop a plan for. And it's going to be a great Sunday. I hope you can come join us, North Point, 9:30 and 11:15 this Sunday as we continue a different kind of marriage.